Hey guys! Well, I just graduated college and I'm packing up to move again. You can't see it, but there's like a whole line of boxes against that wall. Anyway, I thought I'd get one more review in before I left my apartment, and today we are talking about one of the big ones. Ladies and gentlemen, you wanted the best, you got... well, you got Kiss. Kiss. Most people in my generation think of this band as being corny dad rock and selling out, sullying their image with a bunch of commercial ventures. But they're also one of the biggest bands in the world. They've had numerous gold and platinum records and have sold more than 75 million records worldwide. When I was a kid growing up, my parents were far from Kiss fans. In fact, they were really more on the Grateful Dead side of rock. Yet, I still knew who this band was even before I heard any of their music. And how couldn't I? There is no denying that these guys were incredible entertainers. When you think of Kiss, you think of their crazy live performances, with the makeup and armor, Gene Simmons spitting blood, the levitating drum kit, and the massive amount of pyrotechnics. This is how a rock concert is supposed to look, how it's supposed to feel, how it's supposed to be. Now you may have noticed that I haven't talked about the music itself, and, well, when it came to Kiss's music, they had very good, pyrotechnics. I mean, look at that show! Unfortunately, the music itself is kinda... Don't get me wrong, they have some good songs, like Love Gun, and obviously Detroit Rock City is an untouchable classic, but I found a lot of their stuff kind of average, and some of it was pretty bad. While they certainly had some good albums, for as distinctive as their image was, they never had the same distinctiveness or consistency to their music. By all means, please take my opinions in this video with a grain of salt. I'm not trying to say they're all style over substance, and maybe it's just because I had to be there to understand their appeal, but for me, when you take away the live performances, there's just not really a whole lot that makes them stand out from other 70s rock bands. Well, now that 90% of you have disliked this video, let's talk about the one album that even Kiss fans wouldn't touch. An album from 1981, only known as Music from the Elder. And yes, the quotation marks are in the title. Music from the Elder is one of those legendary failures. It was their first commercial flop, and critics and fans alike have considered it one of the worst albums of all time. Even the band members have distanced themselves from this album. The one good thing about this album is that it was the first to feature longtime drummer Eric Carr, aka The Fox, who would come to be beloved by fans and stay with the band until his too-soon death from cancer in '91. But apart from that, there's a reason I wanted to talk about this album for Was It Really That Bad? Almost forgot about that. Well, before I talk about the album itself, let's give a bit of background. The band wasn't in a great place in 1981. They'd had a hit with Dynasty 2 years earlier, and particularly the song I Was Made for Loving You, but behind the scenes the band was fracturing. Founding drummer Peter Criss, the Catman, was recovering from a car accident and didn't wind up playing on most of the album, and he apparently started lashing out at the other members in the following tour. And the album itself alienated many of their fans, upset at their switch to a more disco-influenced sound. Their follow-up album, Unmasked, fared even worse, and by the time it was released, Criss was out of the band, and they had to put their following tour on hold until they found a new drummer. By '81, it was clear it wasn't working, and things had to change. But how does a band as big as Kiss change their familiar sound and formula? Simple. They went prog. Kiss. Rock and roll all night. Going prog. You see the problem here, right? Kiss was a cock rock band. Progressive rock was all about multi-movement epics, experimentation, large overarching concepts. A hard rock band like Kiss going prog would have been a bad idea in any year, but especially in 1981 because by all accounts, prog was dead by then. I mean, nobody wanted to hear prog from any band in 1981, right? Yeah, there's my answer to that question. No, prog wasn't as big as it was in the 70s, but the 80s hadn't fully kicked in yet, so there was still a market for it. This was the year Rush released their highest-selling album, Moving Pictures, and was also the year of Paradise Theater, the biggest album from Styx, as well as King Crimson's big comeback with Discipline. Plus, the year earlier, Yes entered the 80s with their sleeper hit, Drama. And as for hard rock bands going prog, well, Rush started as a hard rock band who even toured with Kiss, and they made that transition alright. Heck, 3 years earlier, The Sweet, one of Kiss's big influences, went prog with the Level-Headed album, and it turned out well. And you know, Kiss already has the fantastical sci-fi thing going on with their costumes and personae.
Yeah, looking at it that way, this album could be crazy enough to work. However, it had some issues from the very beginning.
For one thing, the title. Music from the Elder. Why is it called that? Well, this album was originally meant to be the soundtrack for a movie they were making that was indeed called The Elder, but they abandoned the movie, presumably because they remembered how their previous movie had fared. But they kept the album title because, it's good enough, we don't need to change it. Also, apart from the band name in the corner, can you even tell this is a Kiss album? This was the first Kiss album where the band members were nowhere to be seen on the cover. I get that it's similar to a lot of prog albums at the time, which usually obscured the band in favor of some kind of artwork, but for a band as image-driven as Kiss, not including the members on the cover was a mistake. At least put a spiked glove in his hand or something.
And then the music itself. Let's give it a listen.
The album's first track is The Oath, and...
sounds like Kiss.
You're not gonna mistake this for King Crimson or anything. It does sound a bit like early Russian parts, which makes sense since, again, they toured together, but for the most part, this is a Kiss song. It's not radically different as an opening track.
So why do I forget about this song as soon as it finishes?
That is a bad sign. Even in Kiss's worst songs, they were still memorable. Maybe it sounds too much like a generic Kiss song, or maybe the chorus is a little weak.
Actually, what the hell are these lyrics?
Okay, so they've clearly watched Conan the Barbarian recently, or maybe read it since the movie wasn't out yet. You know, I would have expected Kiss to be more about the sci-fi side of prog than the sword and sorcery side, but I guess I wouldn't have made a D&D bio into a song either. Is this really the best they could come up with for a chorus? First of all, if you're going to do falsetto, it has to be 100% good or it'll sound like trash. But this also isn't a memorable chorus either. Hell, the pre-chorus would have been a better chorus than the actual chorus. At least it has those nice harmonies. But you know, it's not that bad. For one thing, it at least sounds good. The album was produced by Bob Ezrin, the guy behind The Wall, Welcome to My Nightmare, and even Kiss's earlier album Destroyer, so you're not going to get a colossal sonic disaster like Van Halen 3 or Dee Dee Ramone's rap album. The drumming is great, I like how the instrumentals drop out during part of the solo, and that added synth during the bridge is pretty cool.
We're at least starting off on a better foot than previous albums I reviewed, so let's move on to track 2, Fanfare. And there are the flutes. Okay. This must have been so jarring for Kiss fans at the time. You know, when I first heard this part, I swear I thought Snoop Dogg was gonna start rapping.
Gorillas in the Boss Dog, Planet of the Apes.
This isn't a bad orchestral track by any means, but it feels weird going into this immediately after The Oath. It must have been jarring for Kiss fans at the time, especially since it ends with what sounds like some monks singing in a church. But then it leads right into track 3, Just a Boy.
Okay, confession time. I'm not a fan of Paul Stanley's singing voice. Yeah, I probably deserve that.
I mean, I'm not stupid. I don't expect every rock singer to sound like Freddie Mercury. And heck, there are plenty of singers with unconventional singing voices whose music I love. So I don't know why Paul's singing voice grates on me so much. Maybe the tone he sings with is kind of yelpy? That's probably why I dislike Kiss's ballads. None of the guys in Kiss are great singers, but their voices are more suited for heavier instrumentation. But when you get rid of that, the vocals are front and center and they have to stand on their own. And in this song... yeah, it has all those same problems. He seems to be trying for some sort of operatic style, but it doesn't work, and it's not aided by a lackluster chorus. Now the lyrics, on the other hand, set up the album's plot.
See, they scrapped the movie of The Elder, but they kept the concept for the album, and it seems to be a loose story about the main character being summoned to fight evil, hence his doubts about his goal.
But this seems to go completely against the oath, doesn't it? Like, that song was all about how he swears to protect or whatever, but this one says he's no hero? What's that all about? Then we get to the next song, Dark Light, which...
The hell? Is this Jaws?
What a strange reference. The song does eventually kick in for real, and...
Watch out, or it's Sodom and Gomorrah, the malevolent order.
Again, what are these lyrics? What do Sodom and Gomorrah have to do with the concept? And why does it feel so disconnected from the previous songs?
Simple. They got screwed by the label.
It's weird to think that Kiss were ever small or unpopular enough to be the victims of executive meddling, but that's exactly what happened here. Kiss submitted the album with a specific track listing in mind, and for whatever reason, Casablanca Records promptly gave them the finger and replaced it with their own track listing.
Which feels weird for them to do, given that the order of songs is especially important on a concept album.
As if it wasn't already bad enough, they basically did the equivalent of tearing all the pages out of a book, throwing them up in the air, and then binding them back together again.
It wasn't until 1997 when Kiss remastered the album and moved the songs into the intended order. But hey, maybe the intended order makes the album better, maybe hearing the songs how they were meant to be heard makes it less of a jumbled mess, and maybe overdosing on 5-hour energy will make you immortal. No, I've listened to the album with both track orders and it's still a mess, but for the sake of this review, I'll talk about the tracks in the intended order. Fanfare and Just a Boy were originally the first two tracks, which makes way more sense. They're followed by the third track, Odyssey, originally released as track 10. This song has kind of an Electric Light Orchestra feel. You can definitely hear the influence of Bob Ezrin and orchestrator Michael Kamen. The vocals, though...
From a far-off galaxy, I hear you calling me. We are on an Odyssey.
Yeah, Paul Stanley's singing voice is just not suited for this type of music. Like, take this line, for example, As We Cross the Starry Sea.
As we cross the starry sea.
What note is that supposed to be at the end, even? It sounds like he's trying for a D, like, As we cross the starry sea, but it misses, and it goes for more like a C sharp. As we cross the starry sea. Did you do a second take, Paul?
Speaking of which, breaking news! The lyrics make no sense.
Once upon not yet, long ago someday.
What? So has it happened or not? Will it happen in the future? What is this wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff?
There's a child in a sundress looking at a rainy sky. There's a place in a desert where an ocean once danced by.
What do any of these things have to do with the chorus? Or the album's concept, for that matter? The plot is basically the hero's journey, that an unnamed young guy is selected by an unnamed council of elders to fight an unnamed evil force. As Gene Simmons puts it, the Elder are a life form without body. They are benevolent, but committed to the balance of opposites, and when darkness gets too strong, a hero is born to restore the balance.
You know, I think I've heard that plot before. In fact, I think I wrote it back in 4th grade.
Seriously, this is such basic stuff. I personally feel that Chosen One plots are overdone, but this in particular is so vague it could apply to any sci-fi fantasy movie or series out there. It could even apply to ones that didn't exist yet, given that the young protagonist trains with an older man named Morpheus.
Please tell me this album wasn't the inspiration for The Matrix.
On to track 4, Only You, which is track 5 from the original pressing. The song starts with a decent enough riff and Gene Simmons on lead vocals.
Have the answers, but the questions you have to find.
Oh, I know this one. 42.
Only you are the man-child.
What?
You are the light, and you are the way.
Did man-child have a different meaning back in the 80s?
I don't know, man-child usually makes me think about those grown adults who make 2-hour video essays about how cartoons were better in the good old days. Maybe he means man-child like a whimsical adult? The rest of the lyrics are your basic Obi-Wan, Oracle, vague advice. It has its moments, like this callback to Just a Boy. But ultimately, it's kind of forgettable. Only You goes right into track 5, Under the Rose.
The more you hurt, the less you feel the pain.
I beg to differ. Listening to this album hasn't numbed me yet.
And the more you change, the more you stay the same.
Okay, putting prog fantasy instrumentation under a cliche line like that doesn't make it any less cliche.
But now before you lies of west and and from this boy you may become a man.
What quest? How will we become a man? What, in just 7 days you'll make him a man? Tell me, Gene!
The rose in this song isn't a literal rose, it's referring to the Order of the Rose, the mysterious group that the Elders work for, which is described in the album's liner notes. I'm telling you this because it's never explained in the album itself. I can imagine fans were confused about this, and about the line, "Do you take the oath?" when the protagonist had literally taken the oath in the first track. Guess that's what happens when you make an album that's a soundtrack to a movie that was never made, but the tracks are out of order, and the only way you'd know that is if you read it on Wikipedia, which didn't exist when this album was released! Well, next up is Dark Light again, or as I called it, the Jaws song.
A dark light, a darkness never ending, a dark light of perversion and hate.
This is lead guitarist Ace Frehley's only song on the album, and you can tell how much he's phoning it in right now. It should come as no surprise that he wasn't into this, in part because he was at the height of his addiction to coke, pills, and alcohol, but also because he fundamentally disagreed with the album's conception. The original plan was to make a harder rock album, and from the few scrapped tracks that have been released, it would have been like Destroyer Part 2. But somewhere along the line, they got the idea of going prog, which Ace was against. He was outvoted 2-1 by Paul and Gene, and Eric was a new guy, so he didn't get a vote.
I'm just jazzed about being on the show, man.
Legend has it, Ace even recorded his parts separately from Paul and Gene.
In hindsight, Ace might have been the voice of reason.
Kiss weren't the best instrumentalists in the world, but they were masters at writing earworms. So many of their songs, even their worst ones, have some of the most memorable choruses of all time. And this isn't meant as a diss, writing a good hook is hard. It's an art that even some of their better-aged contemporaries never mastered.
Now let's look at their hooks on this album. There aren't any.
I think I understand why, too. Prog doesn't really focus on big hooks. Choruses come second to instrumental virtuosity, experimentation, and what some critics would call classical wankery. So in their attempt at going prog, Kiss stopped writing the big choruses they were known for. That's a big problem with this album. It's playing to all the band's weaknesses and none of their strengths. Let's get to one of the album's better tracks. A World Without Heroes is track 7, and it's a nice low-key number by Gene.
World without heroes is like a world without sun.
The song is about the meaning that heroes can provide for people, and what would happen if no one had heroes or people to look up to. An interesting concept for a song, and I've seen other bands tackle it well. Check out No More Heroes by Slash for another good example. It's weird, I said earlier that I don't like most of Kiss's slower songs, yet I really enjoy this one. I think it's because it's far more subtle and low-key than most of their ballads, which tend to be bombastic and dramatic. This kind of feels like a Pink Floyd cut.
Where you don't know what you're after, or if something's after you.
Paul Stanley even gets his David Gilmour moment in there. Huh. Didn't know Paul could play lead.
Seriously, this is so uncharacteristic of Kiss, but in like the best possible way. Where is this coming from? Let me look this up. Okay, so it was co-written by Paul and Gene, along with Bob Ezrin and... Are you kidding me?
Lou freaking Reed co-wrote this track? The former Velvet Underground frontman and the mastermind behind songs like Satellite of Love, Sweet Jane, Walkin' the Wild Side, Heroin, and White Light, White Heat?
Well, this only makes the third worst album he's worked on.
Although, amusingly, Reed's only contribution to this song was apparently just coming up with the title, A World Without Heroes.
Written sideways on one of Lou's papers was A World Without Heroes, and immediately all of us said, that's a cool title, that's a great...
Man, even back then it didn't take much to get a co-writing credit, huh?
But regardless, this is a great song. It's one of the only songs from this album that Kiss ever performed after 1981, which is a testament to how good it is, and...
It's no place for me.
Aw, is Gene Simmons upset? Is the big bad demon crying? I'm sorry, that final shot is hilarious to me. I think it's because of the fact that he's crying over his makeup and costume. It totally pulls me out of the moment whenever I watch this video. Well, anyway, the next song on the remastered release was The Oath, followed by Mr. Blackwell, which was also co-written by Lou Reed, and it's a villain song. Kinda, I guess.
I never said I was more than I am. Do what I want, I don't give a damn.
It's strangely structured. The verses seem to be from the perspective of Mr. Blackwell, while the chorus seems to be addressing him, a la "You're a mean one, Mr. Grinch."
You're cold and mean, and in between, you're rotten to the core. You're not well, oh Mr. Blackwell.
The song doesn't really pick up until the solo, which is admittedly pretty awesome. And in addition to not introducing the main villain until over halfway through the album, it somehow doesn't say much about the villain. Like, he's evil, he hates the people, he likes to sin, but what are his motivations? What's his end game? And who even is he?
I am your father.
Oh. Wow.
Yes, indeed. A year before this album came out, The Empire Strikes Back was released to theaters, and Gene Simmons is a massive sci-fi nerd, so it's no surprise that this album was heavily influenced by Star Wars. I mean, just swap out the characters' names. The boy is Luke Skywalker, Morpheus is Obi-Wan, The Order of the Rose is the Jedi, and Mr. Blackwell is Darth Vader. It just sucks that writing drug-fueled fanfiction music didn't work out for Kiss like it did for Rush or Led Zeppelin. The penultimate track on the remastered version is an instrumental called Escape from the Island. What island? Why are they trying to escape from it? When was it even established that the story takes place on an island?
These questions and more will never be answered. It could have just as easily been called Return of the Phantom of the Park, and it would have made just as much sense.
But all of that is to say that this is actually pretty great. In fact, if there's one thing I can genuinely praise about music from The Elder, it's that the instrumentals are probably the best I've heard in a Kiss album. Like, they don't half-ass anything. You can tell they're really committing to making the music as tight as possible, even if they skimp out on the concept. And a big part of what makes this song work in particular is Eric Carr's drumming. Dude's just going ape behind the kit. Whenever Kiss experimented in the future, it was always in more of a pop-friendly direction, and it's a shame that Carr is best known for his work during their Unmasked years because the music from that era never really gave him much of a chance to shine. Escape from the Island is followed by I, an upbeat rocker about the hero finally being ready to fight evil.
Said I didn't stand a chance. I wouldn't win no way. But I've got news for you. There's nothing I can't do.
Except for making a prog album, that is.
I don't need no money. I don't need no fame.
Well, that's good, because you won't get any with this album.
Also, it's ironic that he's singing that he doesn't need fame while being carried by a huge horde of fans.
Don't need to get wasted. It only holds me down.
Okay, now you're just dissing Ace Frehley. Low blow, man.
Although I'll admit that this song does have the closest thing to a hook on this album. Even if it is still less memorable than most of their choruses, I can imagine singing along with it. It makes sense that this was released as a single. It's the type of cock rock you'd expect from this band. And it ends with dialogue between Morpheus and the Elder.
Do you still deem him worthy of the fellowship? I certainly do, my lord.
Damn right he's worthy. After all, we seem to be at the halfway point in this album, meaning that it's time for the boy to stand up against—
Wait, it's over? What the hell?
That's it? That's where the album ends? The boy spends the entire time preparing, this dude says he's ready, the end? That would be like if The Empire Strikes Back was nothing but 2 hours of Luke training with Yoda. It's an unsatisfactory letdown. The entire concept weighed this album down. Prog wasn't dead in 1981, but big sci-fi concept albums like this certainly were. Rush weren't still making stuff like 2112 and Cygnus X1. Even The Wall, the last big rock opera released before this, was very much grounded in reality. Sure, it used surreal imagery, but it was to convey real emotions about a declining mental state.
Or maybe this too was a metaphor.
A metaphor for how we believe we're destined for greatness, and we spend our lives training and working until we're ready, but the moment never comes and we find ourselves with no job, no foreseeable future, reviewing Kiss albums for a living!
You can see now why people didn't like this one.
Years later, Gene and Paul said they were struggling to compete against the popularity of new genres, and that the album was a result of trying too hard to pander to the critics.
We'll show them how smart and musical we are.
It would be our attempt to woo the critics. We wanted peer acceptance and critical approval, and lost sight of the fact that none of that had mattered to us in the beginning.
Ironically, critics were all over this album at first.
Rolling Stone said it was better than anything the group has recorded in years, and Hi-Fi News and Record Review called it a surprisingly good attempt by Kiss to edge forward. But the praise didn't last. Music from the Elder was their first album not to go gold, charting even worse than the band's solo albums. By '82, it had fallen off the album charts, and that was the last straw that led Ace to quit the band, not returning until 1996. For a long time, it maintained a status among fans and the band members as their worst album.
Although in recent years, it has started to garner a cult following.
There's a small contingency of fans who adore music from the Elder and consider it an undiscovered gem. Some have made recuts that add some of the demos and B-sides scrapped from it, and there's even been talks of making a fan film of the Elder.
And believe me, I get it. This album has a lot to appreciate, the band was branching out and experimenting. It's just a shame that so much of that experimentation doesn't work.
I'm sorry, but as much as I love the instrumentals in this album, as a cohesive piece, it has too many flaws for me to enjoy. As I said, I am not a fan of Kiss, but listening to this album made me understand exactly what people like about this band, and exactly why they don't like this album. Kiss almost immediately corrected course, and the follow-up, Creatures of the Night, was the heavier album they'd planned on making. And while it wasn't as big as their previous albums, it has been seen as a return to form for the band.
And Kiss would never release anything embarrassing again.
Activate the Dynasty Star Portal!
You mean the Ferris wheel?
It's actually a portal to the cosmic realm of Casteria.
And Gene Simmons was never a douchebag again. Well, gotta get back to packing. See y'all later.
Hey guys, thanks for watching my review. I used a lot of Kiss music in this, which means it'll likely be demonetized, so if you like this video and want to support the channel, then hit up my Patreon link in the description, and of course, like, comment, and subscribe. I have another script finished as well, so look forward to that in the coming weeks. But yeah, I'll see you in my next video, and until then, rock on.
What I miss